Inaugural address of William Howard Taft, Thursday, March 4, 1909. My fellow citizens, anyone who has taken the oath I've just must feel a heavy heart of responsibility. If not, he has no conception of the power and the duty of the office upon which he is about to enter, or he is lacking in a proper sense of an obligation which the oath opposes. The office of an inaugural address is to give a summary outline of the main policies of a new administration so far as they can be anticipated. I have had the honor to be one of the advisors of my distinguished predecessor, and as such, to hold up in his hands the reform he has initiated. I would be untrue to myself, to my promises, and to the declaration of the party platform upon which I was elected to office if I did not make the maintenance and enforcement of those reforms the most important feature of my administration. They were directed to the suppression of my lawlessness and abuses of power of suppression of the lawlessness of the great combination of capital and Western Railroad and the industry enterprises carrying on interstate commerce. The steps which my predecessor took and the legislation passed in its recommendation away accomplished much, with having a general halt in vicious policies which created popular alarm and have brought about in the business affected a much higher regard for existing laws. To render the reforms lasting, however, and to at secure at the same time freedom from alarm at those parts of pursuing proper and progressive business methods, further legislative and executive action are needed. Relief of the railroad from certain restrictions of the antitrust law have been urged by my predecessor and will be urged by me. On the other hand, the administration is pledged to the legislation looking to a proper federal supervision and the restriction to prevent excessive issue of bonds and stocks by companies owning and operating interstate commercial railroad. I hope to be able to submit in the next first regular session of the incoming Congress definite suggestions in respect of the needed amendments to the antitrust and the interstate commerce law and changes required in the executive department concerned in their enforcement. The work of formulating into practical shape and changes is creative work of the highest order and requires all of the deliberative possible in the interval. I believe that the amendments to be proposed are just as necessary in the protection of legitimate business as is the clinching of the reforms which properly bear the name of the predecessor. The proposal to revise the tariff made in such an authoritative way as to lead the business community to count upon it necessarily holds all those branches of necessity. It disturbs the whole business of the country. It's imperatively necessary, therefore, that a tariff bill be drawn in good faith in accordance with the promises made before the election by the party and perform in power and as promptly passed and as due consideration will permit. It's not that tariff is more important in the long run than the perfecting of the reforms in respect to antitrust legislations and interstate commerce regulation, but the need for action when the revision of the tariff has has been determined upon the more immediate to avoid embarrassment of business. To secure the needed speed in the passage of the tariff bill, it would be wise to attempt no other legislation at the extra session. The obligation on part of the responsible for the expenditures made to carry on the government to be as economical as possible and to make the government the burden of taxation as light as possible is plain and should be affirmed in every declaration of government policy. This is especially true when we are face to face with heavy deficit. But when the desire to win the popular approval leads to the cutting off of expenditure really needed to make the government effective and to enable it to accomplish proper objectives, the result is as much to be condemned as the waste of government need funds in unnecessary expenditure. The scope of modern government in what it can and ought to accomplish for its people has been widened far beyond the principles laid down by the old laissez-faire school of political writers, and this widening has met popular approval. The importance of supervising business of great railways and industrial combinations and the necessary investigation and the prosecution of unlawful business methods are not necessary tax upon government which did not exist half a century ago. We should have an army of so organized and so officered as to be capable in times of emergency, in cooperation with the national militia and under the provision of a proper national volunteer law, rapidly to expand into the force sufficient to resist all probable invasion from abroad, and to furnish a respectable expeditionary force, if necessary, in the maintenance of a traditional American policy which bears the name of President Monroe. What has been said of the Army may be affirmed in even a more emphatic way of the Navy. The modern Navy cannot be improvised. It must be built and in existence when the emergency arises, which calls for its use and operation. My distinguished predecessor has in many speeches and messages set out the great force and striking language the necessity of maintaining a strong navy commensurate with the coastline, the governmental resources, and the foreign trade of nations. And I wish to reiterate all the reasons which he has presented in favor of the policy of maintaining a strong navy as the best conservator of the peace with other nations and the best means to securing respect for the assertion of our rights, the defense of our mass interest, and the exercise of our influence in international matters. The policy of the United States in the Spanish War and since has given it a position of influence among the nations that it's never been had before, and should be constantly exerted to securing it to our bona fide citizens, whether native or naturalized. Respect for them as such in foreign countries. We should make every effort to prevent humiliation and degrading prohibition against any of our citizens wishing temporarily to sojourn in foreign countries because of race and religion. The admission of Asiatic immigrants who cannot be amalgamated with the population has been made the subject either of prohibitionary clause in our treaties and institution of strict administrative regulation secured by diplomatic negotiation. I sincerely hope that we may continue to minimize the evil like to arise from such immigration without unnecessary friction by mutual concession between self-respecting governments. Meantime, we must take every precaution to prevent or failing that to punish outbursts of race feeling among people against foreigners of whatever nationality among who have or by a granted treaty right to pursue lawful business here and to be protected against lawless assault and injury. One of the reforms to be carried out during the incoming government administration is a change in the monetary and banking law so as to secure greater elasticity in the form of currency available for trade and to prevent the limitation of law from the operating to increase the embarrassment of a financial panic. The Monetary Commission, lately appointed, is giving full consideration to existing conditions and to all proposed remedies and will doubtless suggest one of those that will meet the requirement of business and of public interest. The incoming Congress should promptly fulfill the promise of Republican platform and pass a proper postal savings bank bill. It will not be unwise or excessive paternalism. The promise of to repay the government will furnish an inducement of saving deposits which private enterprises cannot supply and at such a low rate of interest it as to not withdraw custom from existing banks. It will substantially increase the funds available for investment at the capital in useful enterprise. It will furnish its absolute security and will make the proposed scheme of government guarantee of deposits so alluring without its pernicious results. The importance of the part in which the Department of Agriculture and Commerce and Labor may play in ridding the market of Europe and prohibition and discrimination against the importation of our products is fully understood, and it is hoped that the use of maximum and minimum future of a tariff law to the soon passed will be effective to remove many of the restrictions. I will look forward with the hope of increasing the already good feeling between the South and the other sections of the country. My chief purpose is not to effect a change in the electoral vote of the southern states. It is that as a secondary consideration. What I look forward to is an increase in the tolerance of political views of all kinds of advocacy throughout the South and the existence of a respectable political opposition in every state, even more than this, to an increased level feeling of the part of all the people in the South that the government is their government and the officers of the states are their officers. The Negroes are now Americans. Their ancestors came here years ago against their will, and this is their only country and their only flag. They have shown themselves anxious to live for and die for it. Encountering the race feeling against them, subjected to at times to cruel injustice growing out of it, they may have our profound sympathy and aid in the struggle they are making. We are charged with the sacred duty of making their path as smooth and easy as we can. Any recognition of their distinguished men at any appointment to office from among their numbers is properly taken as encouragement and the appreciation of their progress, and their just policy should be pursued when suitable occasion offers. I wish to say that insofar as I can hope to promote the enactment of the further legislation of this law character, I am strongly convinced that the government should make itself as responsible to employees injured in the employee as an interstate railway corporation as is made responsible by federal law to its employees, and I shall be glad whenever as any additional and reasonable safety device can be invented to reduce the loss of life and limb among railway employees to urge Congress to require its adoption by interstate railways. Having thus reviewed the questions likely to recur during my administration, and have expressed in a summary way the position which I am expect to take in recommendation to Congress and my conduct as an executive. I invoke the considerate sympathy and support of my fellow citizens and the aid of Almighty God in discharge of my responsible duties. Thank you and good night.